All right, so we just saw a video of all about objects in JavaScript, but just I want to be very clear. That is just how we're going to use objects in a way like lists, like arrays. As you heard, arrays are objects. That's a whole different discussion for a different day. So I do just want to focus now on the ways that we can use our arrays and our objects to create things that make a little bit more sense as you code them and allow you to do some more interesting future work. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to this username example because I told you I didn't love how we did some stuff. So the one thing I really didn't like is that here we put, we add usernames, the iterative, and then 0 and then 1. So we are doing last name and then the first name. What I would really like to do is make this just make a little bit more sense from a human perspective. And the way we can do that is instead of storing our usernames as arrays, we're going to store them as objects. And what's interesting is if you're someone who does a lot of work with like cascading style sheets, is that this notation will look very similar to you for like when you do a style on in HTML. So what I'm going to do is everything else is the exact same. I just want to be very clear about that. And what we're going to do is we're going to change username from an array into a object. And if you remember correctly, the way the video showed it was we're going to you start with curly brackets, and we can do a couple things here. We can either define everything like this, such as first name colon, and then we get the value of this first name, which is the same thing. So let's do this. Let's get rid of, just to not be confusing, let's call it first. That is our key, and then the value is first name, and then we put a comma, and then we say last, which is our new key, and we use the variable last name. So this saves. Let's go ahead to here. And what I can do now is, because the array usernames push to usernames being the larger array of all the names, we're adding this object to that array. We'll now have an array of objects. And what we can do from a code perspective is, instead of accessing 0, we can actually access quote first and quote last. Now if I save this, let's go ahead and debug it. Do an edge here. Okay, I'm going to bring up my code. Yes, always open the DevTools. Okay, I'll go to our console. Okay, so first name, we'll do Alice Jones, add to registry. And so what we see here now is that there is, because we're outputting, if I remember correctly, we are outputting, where was it? Console.log usernames. Yeah, so we're outputting the entire array. Let's do Bob Smith, add to registry. And so now we see that our array is made up of we have two objects, etc. If I output usernames, let's see if this is going to work. Alice Jones, Bob Smith, right? So I was able to very easily, because it's first and because it's last, as a human, I'm able to interpret, oh, okay, I actually want to do last first. I want to do first, last. Save it, refresh it. And I'll put usernames, Jones, Alice, Robert, Bob. So in this case, we're able to use our code and, assemble our array made up of objects. I personally use this a lot in programming JavaScript. I use it a ton, and as the semester starts to unfold, and we'll talk about application program interfaces or APIs, like pulling data from another website. A lot of the times, things come down as objects, or they're arrays of objects, right? And sometimes there's objects with objects in them. So that's a whole thing that is just a pain in the butt. I'm not even gonna say we're gonna talk about it because we probably will, but it's just a pain in the butt. So you have to navigate. You have to navigate things just like this, where it's like a bracket and then a bracket kind of thing. What are some other names we can do for this, or other ways to do this? Well, instead of doing the constant username, instead of creating an object called username that has all these defined, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do it the one way the video showed, which was a curly bracket, and then I'm going to say username dot first equals first name, and I can do username dot last equals last name, and the code will still execute the same way. Yep, still works the exact same way, and then we still see first and last, etc. So in this case, our use of objects as lists or within arrays, like we can start to have really easier things for us to find, easier ways to store data. And then what we'll eventually get to is something called JSON, which is the JavaScript object notation. And so let's just pause here for the week, because it's been a lot, I think, with arrays. But in summary, arrays, they hold things for us. They hold things in a way that makes it easy for us to access. So it almost works like a little database. I can say to, but it's not a database by name, it's a database by where in the list it is. I can pull things based off of where they are in the list. I can say, like, hey, give me the third item in the list, give me the first item in the list, etc. Remember, first item is always 0, second item is 1, etc. Something else that we can do is use something like objects, where we can create an object that has values based off of different, what we call properties. So instead of, I think the video talked about how, a variable specific in an object is a property. So we can create a user, here that has all these different properties, like a first name, a last name. But I mean, I can just throw some other really interesting things in here. I can say, what's their ID number? It might be 2532, etc. I might have username dot age, equals 45, something like that. And if I save it and I run it, when we look at the list, we just, boom, added these items. So now we're starting to have very useful ways that we can store items about something, and then we can store arrays of those items. So it's very, the way I'm presenting it right now is very data driven. Like, it seems like it's much more about data. But a lot of the stuff that we've been setting the groundwork for, we're about to do something in a couple weeks after spring break where we will be able to dynamically create the front end with buttons, with text, with all of this different stuff. We'll be able to add them dynamically, and we can pull items from these lists, from these arrays and these objects to create those and to make them really useful for us. So like I said, we're gonna stop here. Let's get to your homework for this week.